I am really excited for this next panel discussion featuring some outstanding Black founders across different industry sectors and led by one of the principals of HBCU VC. Jaisa, welcome aboard.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Don, for that introduction. My name is Jaisa Minor. I'm the head of partnerships for HBCU VC, which is a nonprofit dedicating to informing and being able to have an involvement in how capital is deployed to Latinx, Black, and Indigenous communities. And today I have the pleasure of serving as the moderator for this panel. I'm also a venture partner for Nomis Ventures, which is a venture capital fund investing in fintech, machine learning, AI, and also marketplaces. So without any delay, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists for the day. First, we have Jen Nwankwo, who will introduce herself first.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Jen Nwankwo. I am the founder of 1910 Genetics. 1910 is a biotechnology company that is integrating artificial intelligence, computation, and bioautomation to accelerate the design of both small molecule and protein therapeutics. We were founded 3 years ago. We're a Series A stage company based here in Boston, Massachusetts. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Jen. Next up, we have Tshaka Cunningham.
Hey, everyone. It's great to meet you. I'm Tshaka Cunningham from the great Princeton class of 1996. I'm actually the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Polaris Genomics. We're a precision behavioral health company that's using the power of genomics to improve the diagnosis and treatment of mental and behavioral health disorders. We're a seed stage company, just completed our seed round this year, and are about to embark on our Series A fundraise. So great to be with you all today.
Thank you, Tshaka. Next, we have Cullen Buie.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Great to participate on this panel. My name is Cullen Buie. I'm on the faculty at MIT in mechanical engineering. Been at MIT about a decade, so with tenure. Expertise is in fluid mechanics and microfluidics. Also co-founder of Kytopin, which is a biotech located in Cambridge, where we are delivering or developing scalable systems for cellular engineering. So we deliver DNA, RNA, CRISPR, other gene editing constructs into human cells for ex vivo engineered cellular therapies.
Thank you so much, Cullen, for that intro. As I said, we have all of the best for today's conversation, and I'm super excited to be able to jump into it. Let's get right to it. So the first question that I'd like to ask you all is around how have universities or other academic institutions supported your company's journey? We are here to celebrate excellence in academic entrepreneurship. So I would love to hear how your education experience and how the institutions involved in that have helped you build your company.
Sure, I'm happy to dive in on that. For me, the science is center in everything that what we're doing. So, first getting the degree in molecular biology at Princeton and then my degree in the same discipline from Rockefeller helped me get started in the field. And then, I've always kept an academic appointment somewhere. So I actually have had several throughout my time as a founder. They've been really helpful because you kind of keep one foot in academia where the real hardcore science is being done. And it helps you kind of talk the talk with other academic scientists that you're going to collaborate with to help move forward your projects. So we've gotten great support from academic institutions. We have a grant with the University of Maryland here where we're looking at the intersection of the genetics of PTSD and substance use disorder. So really fascinating stuff that's helping to build some new tools and products for our company and also advancing the field. So academia is a very important part of what we're doing. We're always looking for new things to license from academic institutions that will strengthen our product portfolio. So, academia is a key partner in everything that we're doing.
Cullen, how about you? I heard you talk about MIT and being a tenured professor. How has MIT supported the work that you do, and how do you see that research and using academia to support the scale of your company?
Yeah, so it's very much been it's been very synergistic. So some of the core IP for the company is licensed from my lab, and so it came out of research directly supported at the institution. I would probably say that really the birth of the company was through the NSF I-Core program, which is a grant that you can get that helps you to evaluate certain markets and determine if there's like a product market fit for the research that you've been doing. And so me and my co-founder did the I-Core back in 2015. And then we founded the company in 2017. And our initial capital came from the Engine, which is a entrepreneurial ecosystem and venture fund that was actually initiated by MIT. So MIT is one of the limited partners. And it's about a $500 million fund now. It's about 200 or something million dollars then. And we were one of their first investments back in 2017. So there's been a very tight relationship between our company and academia, from the IP to government grants to even the venture funding we ultimately got through the Engine.
Thanks so much for highlighting that. I think it's super important to highlight the fact that academic institutions through endowments serve as limited partners in a lot of venture capital funds and have been able to reap the benefits of entrepreneurship through the returns and startups that go on to be unicorns and to be successful in public markets. And with HBCU VC, it's part of our mission to bring HBCUs into that fold to help spread that wealth, and so that entrepreneurs from all academic backgrounds are able to participate in that ecosystem as well. So thank you for bringing that point up. The next question that I'd like to ask is, what role does intellectual property play in the success of a company, and what resources have you used to protect and develop yours? Jen, you want to take that one?
Sure, happy to. We are a biotechnology company, and IP is indispensable to what we do. So for us, the two sets of things that we can protect via a number of intellectual property pathways, whether patents, trademarks, et cetera. The first is the core IP underlying our platforms, right? And sort of the unique sort of process by which we do drug design. That in and of itself is patentable, or protectable, I should say. And the actual output, right, from that design process. So the drugs themselves are things you certainly want to protect. A lot of people are familiar with the fact that here in the US, at least, patents in new chemical entities or new drug products, you can have up to 20 years of patent life on them. And you hope that shortly after obtaining those patents, that those drug candidates go on to become drug products, and that you were able to begin commercializing them while they're still under patent protection, right? Because then you have exclusivity to market them and start to recoup some of the very, very expensive investments that have gone into the research and development process. So very, very much a cornerstone of what we do. We could in return, the investment to our investors, if we did not patent our inventions, and if we didn't safeguard them so that we can monetize them down the road. So absolutely indispensable.
Yeah, and I would say, echoing a lot of that, I would say there's an interesting kind of tug of war with IP, and when you do have kind of one foot in academia, because the academic mission is to get information out and to get it out into the public, and so you want to publish and present on things quickly. But of course, if you have commercial interests, you want to make sure that the intellectual property is protected. So this is something that, I find it's very useful for those who are, talk to graduate students and postdocs about like really thinking about your, IP path along with the publication path, and not thinking about them independently. You find a lot of people, they're working on something and they submit an abstract to a conference, and then it's like at the end, it's like, oh crap, I need to like try to patent this. And you're like at the last minute trying to come up with some patent protection, or even worse, you disclose it and then thus lose your ability to patent in certain parts of the world because you've disclosed it. So I think that's one piece, is really trying to recognize that this has to be something that you're thinking about all along the way. And I think the other thing that I would just mention with respect to the company is I find it's interesting when making those decisions of what you do patent and what you don't patent. Like sometimes you think like maybe we don't want this out there, like because we don't want to enable someone to do everything. And so, what is going to be this kind of trade secret, what's going to be know-how, and what do you want actually out there public, in the IP space is also an interesting conversation to have. And that usually comes up more so when you have the company as to, what you might leave out or what you might not put in.
I can second that emotion because there was a great session during yesterday's Empower sessions on intellectual property, and one of the attorneys mentioned the real usefulness and power of keeping a trade secret. And I think that's something that's sort of underutilized in a lot of companies, but I think exactly what you said, Cullen, sometimes you don't want to disclose things too early. But definitely you need to build like a patent around your main core technology and try to create what they call a moat around it, a set of patents that kind of protects your operating space to give you freedom to operate in the space and restrict others from trying to do the same. So that's a really important thing to have and be mindful of, and you will spend a lot of money on that as you develop as a company. I can promise you.
Yeah, I've even seen cases where certain companies, certainly as they get larger, even startups, they will just build into their budget, not just the fees and everything that's going to be related to building their own IP, but even defending that IP. If you're building a company, for example, and it's going to be using CRISPR, like there's just a lot of contention over some of that intellectual property. And that thus, means that there's going to be some risk, and that might just mean that you just need to build a bigger budget for protecting yourself in that space.
I love these points about protecting IP, and Tshaka, what you were saying about making the determination between or both of you, Cullen and Tshaka, talking about making the distinction between trade secrets and what you want to patent. When you are having conversations with potential investors, how do you think about best practices when it comes to talking about intellectual property? Do you have any tips as far as what you should or shouldn't share? And also communicating to help an investor better understand the moat, like you said, Tshaka, around the IP that you have and how that differentiates you from other players in your space?
Well, I think it's important before you disclose any confidential information to have a non-disclosure agreement, at least in place, or some sort of confidentiality agreement. Many investors won't sign those sometimes, but so you got to keep things at a certain level. And I think you just have to be really strategic in the sense that you don't ever want to give away the store, right? So, you want to engender interest and share what you can publicly. And that's why having a patent is somewhat important, because that's public knowledge. That's something that you can share, and they can kind of see that bit under the hood. But if it's something you're developing, like a proprietary system or something that's got code that you don't want to have released, then I would seriously think about keeping that close to the chest. I don't know, Jen, your group does that, so you might be able to speak on that a bit more.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think that you do have to straddle that middle ground. And it also depends on the stage of the company, honestly. Like if you just right at the gate, raising a pre-seed round or a seed round, the investor expectations are different than if you're trying to raise a Series A versus Series B or Series C, So I do think the stage at which you are relative to when you're beginning that venture raise does matter in terms of the amount of detail investors will want to see, the amount of traction and so on, the stage of the development of the product and sort of product maturity and so on. So I do think that that's a big factor as well. But regardless of stage, it is in fact important that you don't disclose information without a confidential agreement in place if it's confidential information. So for example, you could say to an investor, hey, I have some drug molecules and you're just gonna have to take me at my word. I cannot show you what those drug molecules are until you sign an NDA. So it's up to that investor then to decide, do I really wanna see the structure of that drug molecule? Do I want to know the full structure? If I want to know the full structure, then I sign an NDA. If I don't want to sign an NDA, then is there some other way that I can get to that information? And can I make my investment decision without necessarily seeing the full structure of the drug molecule? So that's usually the trade-off there. So yes, VCs would not sign, I think mostly tech VCs, I'd say, Silicon Valley type VCs, because they invest in software. But biotech VCs always sign NDAs as a matter of just routine practice, because they do in fact want to see, if you're saying that, hey, I have discovered the next billion-dollar cancer drug, they want to see the structure and make sure that it is differentiated from prior art. And there's no way they can see that without an NDA in place. So I think investors who do come from that traditional biotech background, NDAs are routine in that space. They're not so much routine for investors who have historically just invested in like enterprise SaaS and just like generic tech type consumer stuff.
Yeah, that's one of those places where it's super helpful to have good mentors and to know like when and how to disclose. And like when you're in, so these things are fresh on my mind. Our company is going through a Series A right now. Like we should be closing, any day now, actually. Like you might see this in the news. Going through this, a couple things that just because it's fresh in my mind. Investors are like, their job is partially to understand the industry and to understand what's happening. So if you're going to disclose a bunch of stuff, they will listen, right? Like it's their job to know what's happening. And so like if you're talking to an investor about raising money, it's partly on you to like do your homework and to try to gauge how serious they are really in making an investment. To Jen's point, if they're going to make an investment, they're going to get to an NDA. If they're hesitant on signing an NDA, they might just be kind of fishing for information. Like meeting with you and hearing you talk about your business and your view on the industry actually helps them do their job. So they're gonna want to meet with you, even if they have no intention on investing. I've absolutely been in situations where an investor, and we find this out later, is actually vetting another company in our space, and we meet with them, and it's like they're meeting with us because they're actually looking at us relative to another. They're kind of advanced in the talks with another company, and then like a month later, it's announced that another company just got around with them. It's like, oh, that's why they didn't move forward. And so you have to be careful, and you have to recognize that you do actually have something to give, and it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, you know what, I would be happy to share that with you when we get an NDA. You should feel empowered to do that.
Yeah, Cullen and Jen, you're dropping gems. And as someone who sits in an investor seat, I definitely can second that sentiment about what you said about investors who are looking to gain information from the meetings that they have with founders. It's absolutely true. And I always preach that when I'm advocating for founders to have the most successful fundraising process possible, is to make sure you get that transparency from an investor around what they're looking for and how to best accelerate the investment process so that there's no time being wasted. Because as a founder, that's one thing that's a precious resource. But it's a great segue as well into the next question that I wanted to ask you all. What do you look for in a strategic investment partner, and how do you vet potential investors for value alignment? Cullen, I'm going to throw that one back to you since you're currently in the fundraising process.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard because on some level, it's like you need some cash. Like you need, like your company's gonna die. Like every startup is just a dying company. It's like every day it's like less money is coming in, and so on some level you're just trying to bring in some money to survive. But beyond that, assuming you're gonna have some options, you want to. I think you want to make sure there's alignment in vision, and expectations, and kind of culture. So for culture, you can talk to other entrepreneurs. Like you want to talk to other people that are in their portfolio, other CEOs and co-founders that have worked with those folks, and see, what is it like? Are they micromanagers? How are they in board meetings? How heavy-handed are they in terms of your interactions as a company? Are they helpful or not? So you definitely want to vet them just like they're going to vet you. I do think you want to pitch your mission. You don't want to pitch what you think is going to be their mission. I will say early on, maybe a mistake it might have made is, coming to an investor and like looking at their portfolio and thinking, I think this might be what they want to see from us. And I don't think that's the way to do it. Like, just pitch who you are, be your company, and find out who's on board with that. And, look for alignment in terms of vision there. And don't try to like mold yourself into what you think they're going to be. Because if you do that, you'll just, every investor meeting, you'll be trying to be someone different. And that's just exhausting. So like, work on your vision, make your vision clear, and then look for those who are aligned with that.
I think that's great advice. I mean, that's what we did. we found a strategic investor as a healthcare system that was really leaning forward into implementing precision medicine into clinical care. And so they will hopefully be one of our first customers once our product is on the street. And they've really been a great partner helping us in the development of our products. So, so we had that kind of strategic investor, but then we also had a traditional kind of VC Silicon Valley type investor as well that led our seed round. And as we're thinking about the investors, sort of earmarking the ones we really want for the Series A, they're folks who kind of will get the vision of what we're doing and have experience in our area. That's the other thing. I think biotech is a very kind of unique field, and it's got a lot of subfields within it. So finding folks that understand diagnostics, genetics, testing, and all of that is very important for us. But of course, like Jen said, at some stage, if they're good people and good investors, that's the other thing I look for, and we look for in the investors, that they're good quality people. Then you might move forward even if they don't have that same institutional knowledge, but they at least have a general grasp of what you're trying to do and are going to be supportive.
Thanks, Jen. Anything you want to add as someone who's successfully been able to raise a noteworthy amount of capital?
Yeah, I think that so our seed round and our Series A were different, where the seed round, I actually did go out to raise, whereas our Series A was a preempted round. So I didn't go out to raise. We were approached first by Microsoft, and then Microsoft brought on Playground Global. I think I totally agree with what Cullen said. Like, look, you just need some cash, first of all right? So that's the first thing. And like I like to say, all money's green, okay? All money's green. So when you get that part squared away, that said VC actually has the money you want, and don't take this for granted. It's a lot of people masquerading as VCs, but they actually don't have money, right? Sometimes people are like the tail end of their fund and they just like stringing you along. So just actually make sure that the person you're talking to actually has money to invest. You will be shocked how many people masquerade as VCs, or maybe they did have a fund at some point. But the fact of the matter is there is no, dry powder to actually invest today. So first things first, you need actual dollars in the bank. Ensure that the person you're talking to actually has dollars in the bank. That's just the first basic table stakes. Now, assuming everybody has money in the bank that you're talking to, then you start to look at, in order for you to have, to be at this point of trying to raise a Series A, you had raised a seed, right? And there were things that you said you were going to do with that seed funding. The first question is, did you do that? Right? Because it's about venture raise is all about saying you're going to do something and doing it, right? So did you do that? Okay, assuming you've done that, what do you want to do next, right? What are your next milestones, right? So maybe your next milestone is you want to launch your first product, or you want to be in the clinic with that next Series A funding. Whatever that is, you want to ensure that whomever you're bringing in at that stage can actually help you with that. So in our case, we're like this company that is equal parts a technology company as well as a biotech company. When we were raising our Series A, the thing that sort of like the thing we had to slay in front of us was around scaling the platform. It was a real engineering problem. And it was like, okay, at Seed, we had built like these prototypes, these small versions to prove out the idea that we can use artificial intelligence and quantum chemistry and bioautomation in all these different ways, but at very small scales, right? And that was what we said we we're going to do. And our seed round helped us, sort of show signs of being able to do that, but at very small scales. The Series A was about, can we scale that up, right? Just because something worked at a prototype level doesn't mean it can work when you try to like massively scale it up and put it in like a multi-tenancy distributed infrastructure and all of that. So that sounds very engineering. And that's where I thought Microsoft was probably the best partner in the world to go with for what's in front of us at the next stage, right? So we're scaling our artificial intelligence and chemistry platforms. We're building a lab from scratch, outfitting it with robotics, connecting that bioautomation with the design and so on. In the next round, Series B, we're going to be looking for a different kind of investor, because then what's going to be in front of us is to populate the pipeline with drug assets and start moving towards the clinic. So that's a different kind of problem. You want people who are more traditional biotech VCs in that lens. And so I'm sort of like kill the dragon that's in front of you right now, and whomever helps you do that is sort of whom you go with. So that's the second lens for me. So the first lens is, do you actually have money? The second lens is, can you help me with the immediate problem I need to solve if I raise that money? And then the third one is like the fit, right? Are you a good person? Am I a good person? Do we work together and so on? That's how I thought about it. That's how I continue to think about it. If I went out to raise a Series B today, it would be how I think about it. Do you have money? Can you help me with the immediate goals I need to hit with this new round of funding? And do we work well together?
That's a fantastic answer. And it really speaks to a lot of the sentiments that I've heard from founders as far as what really helps them scale their company, having an investor who's not just writing a check, but somebody who can come to the table with strategic expertise that is in alignment with the company's next milestone and their ability to be able to come to the table again with accomplishments that enable them to continue to scale, and having an investor who can lead the way and be that advocate that's saying, yes, come join the table. This company is really doing something. So thank you for sharing those points. I want to transition a bit and talk about risk. Risk is something that's inherent in venture capital. It's inherent in a fundraising process. It's inherent in entrepreneurship. But there's a different landscape as far as what risk looks like as a Black founder looking for capital in a space that typically is not so friendly to Black founders in particular. So I want to hear from you all around how risk looks different for you in defining your company. We hear about companies like Theranos that are able to raise millions of dollars off of what essentially is belief capital, being able to sell a vision. But when you think about what you're doing as a Black founder and the type of response that you get from investors around that type of vision, not saying you have the same vision as Theranos, but in sharing your vision and being able to get support solely based on a vision, how do you think about risk? What's your criteria for taking calculated risk? Let's go from there. And Tshaka, let's start with you.
Yeah, I've thought about that particular example a lot because I'm in the diagnostic space, and it just was amazing to me how much money that particular individual raised without the level of scrutiny that some other folks face. But what I would say is that, your goal as a founder and as someone who's trying to build shareholder value is to de-risk your operation and to actually get to a point where you're actually being able to deliver and generate revenue. And that's sort of first and foremost. I think of this Wu-Tang song because I'm from the 90s. There was a song called Cash Rules Everything Around Me. Clean. Get the money, dollar, dollar bill, y'all, right? So you have to build a revenue model, right? Recurring revenue. And that's your job. And a little bit of you are, though, as an entrepreneur, you are kind of selling your dream, but you have to have some substance to that dream to actually be credible and then, to actually make it work. And so getting patents and showing traction and all of these things, these are kind of tick marks, as Jim was saying, on your milestones that you're getting to show that your model works. I think where Black founders encounter, deeper hurdles is that you got to kind of show so much more of that to get to the same level of funding. That's been what I've seen in a lot of cases, not all, but many, that, you talk about your operation being very buttoned up, and we all, want to have something looking great, but, there is a certain level of risk to all of this that's inherent in what we're doing. And if we weren't solving these unsolved problems, we wouldn't be in that field. So I think that that whole piece, that idea of belief capital is real. And I think we just don't see it for a lot of minority founders. That's just been what I've seen. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so many. Wow. I'm trying to think of which direction to go in. I mean, I think there's like risk on multiple levels. And, we had a great, behind the scenes chat about this a week or so ago, but just how, there's the risk, there's like the personal risk, there's the are you going to, take on a job take on this very tough job of being a co-founder when maybe you have a family, maybe you have parents that you're supporting, maybe you have siblings you're supporting. Even if you personally are financially okay, it's like, do you have a support network around you where if this thing, implodes, you aren't worried about, your personal finances because you have, your parents, can do something, or you got cousins that can do something. When you don't have that network, that's tough. Something that I've noticed is, not all, but some VCs kind of expect founders to, kind of live on the cheap and to, kind of scrape by. And they want you to show some grit in this way. And that's just different when those founders have, resources behind them from their family. Whereas like, if you don't have that, it's like, if you're in Jen's position or my position or Tshaka's position, you got this advanced degree where you can go out in industry and make, a couple $100,000 easy, right? And it's like, you really want to start this company, but you kind of like to make more than 50K a year, right? But some VCs kind of expect you to like pay yourself like that. This goes back to the last point of like making sure your vision is aligned with your investors. But like, that's like a big risk that it's almost, maybe I'll give an example here. I was teaching today, and I heard someone use the concept of inclusive teaching, meaning that in inclusive teaching, you're trying to understand the background and situation of every person in the classroom and make sure that the assignments and everything that you're giving put everyone on the same plane. I think we need inclusive investing, like recognizing that everyone coming into the room has a different background. And like, how do you invest in such a way as to put every founder in a position for success, which doesn't mean doing the same thing for everyone necessarily.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, Cullen, because that is a big X factor. I mean, I think in my own personal situation, the reason why I'm 20 years older being an entrepreneur than I would have liked to have been is because I'm first generation college. So the first thing I had to do was to secure the bag for the family and get everything, correct. And so that I would have actually enough in the coffers to be able to take this level of risk, right? So for me, I just made the path to entrepreneurship a little bit longer. And I think that's the case for many a minority entrepreneur, given the wealth gap that we see between particularly African Americans and others in this country. But I think if there were some sort of fund like that, I mean, this is a solvable problem. That's just giving capital to people to kind of level that out. I think you'd see some tremendous strides, because one thing that I have seen from many of the minority founders that I've met, there's so much grit and determination in them and tenacity because of what they've had to go through to even get to that stage. And so I think that is something that I think is maybe sometimes undervalued or underappreciated. And definitely it can be a barrier to entry for many of minority entrepreneurs who would like to even get started sooner.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Cullen and Tshaka. I think that the reality of the wealth gap and the role that it plays in venture capital is super apparent. And for me in my career as a VC, I've always seen venture capital as a form of activism to creating generational wealth in communities that have been excluded from participating in entrepreneurship, either through lack of access to capital or banking services or talent resources. You can think of it on any level. So I appreciate you all sharing that. I would like to invite any of you to share some of the risks that you took into consideration when starting your company. Tshaka, you kind of spoke to it, but I would love to hear any anecdotes that you all feel comfortable sharing around risks that you took into consideration before you decided to launch.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a direct answer, but I do want to comment on like the earlier point you made, and this is for everyone that's listening and for all of us, really. I mean, I kind of felt this responsibility, and I don't, maybe this is wrong, maybe this is stupid, I don't know, but I kind of felt this responsibility, like I kind of have to do this, right? Like how are we going to have more Black and brown folks with wealth to be able to invest in more Black and brown folks if I don't take risks like this? Like I kind of have to take this risk. Relatively speaking, I've been tremendously fortunate And so like, I feel like many people don't even get in the room or even get the opportunity or even get access to even understand about these problems. Like it takes so much to even understand the problems we're trying to solve, much less the solution. And I felt this responsibility, like, I feel like I have to take this risk, because if I don't, like when will we have the, the wealth in the Black community that we would like to see to be able to incubate these ideas? I have to take this risk so that my kids, when they're starting their company, it can be like, if this doesn't work, dad got me. Like, I'd like my kids to have that privilege, right? And so that's not a direct answer to your question, but just, I do feel like on some level, like there's there for those of us that have the opportunity, there's, I hate to say obligation, but I don't know. I feel personally like a little bit of an obligation. Like I should swing for the fences here, and see what we can do.
I feel you
Yeah.
on that, man. I share that sentiment somewhat. And it's like, if you've got all of the ingredients, you've got the education, you've got the intellectual property, you've got the drive. Even if you didn't have the capital, it is, in your back pocket. It's incumbent to at least give it a shot. And I think that that's how I felt about it too, leaving a very comfortable government job that I had worked hard to get to. But I was like, look, I could do this for 30 years, or I could try to swing for the fences, as you put it. I love that, Cullen. And even if I miss, and hit a base hit, it's a win for us all. Because then, even with the base hit and what I'm doing, it'll still be a good windfall. So I think that that's something that is a great sentiment, and I hope more people hear that and be encouraged by that.
Yeah, I think my perspective, as you all speaking, I was thinking back to when I decided to start a company. I wasn't even sure what all the pieces were, but I would say perhaps the biggest driving force for me wasn't necessarily about wealth creation for me, my children, generation, et cetera. It was I just felt like this very pressing pain about the way drug discovery is being done in the pharmaceutical industry today. I mean, I trained as a classical pharmacologist, and I was just very frustrated with how we did things, especially for those of us who did in vivo pharmacology, which is where you're testing all these drug candidates in animals, and it just felt very artisanal and very mundane. And I just dreaded going to the lab as a PhD student. And I just thought, with all this technology, there's got to be a better way to do it. So I think my biggest driving force was I just saw a problem that I just felt like I was put on this earth to fix it. And that was just the biggest driving factor for me. The fact that I'm a woman and I'm Black and all of those came secondary. I didn't even think of it, actually. It was when I went out to start fundraising that some of those things started to become apparent in different ways. But it was just, the problem was just so acute in my mind. And it was just so intense, right? I felt like it was so palpable for me. And I just felt like I was uniquely positioned to try to solve this problem once and for all. So however, moonshotty that might sound, or however idealistic that might sound, that was really what took me out of my job, in my previous very well-paid job, to just say, you know what, I got to go do this. I got to solve this problem. At least I got to try. That was probably the biggest sort of driving force for me.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think you all spoke to your personal experiences in addressing that question, and you actually led into the last question that I wanted to ask before we transition to Q&A, which is, what role does technology play in addressing healthcare disparities as we continue to move forward with this pandemic? COVID has brought to light a lot of the inequities in the healthcare system. And for you all who are in the space of science and health, how do you see this technology still continuing to develop and address inequities that we see in our communities?
I think the technology plays a huge role in that. And what we as a community of minority populations need to be engaged and engage in this work, because I look at something like the field of genetics and genomics and how we make genetic tests. If 90% of the data that's used to figure out the markers for a genetic test were from one community, do you really expect it to be equally effective in all the other communities? And that's actually the case that we're in for genetic studies. 90% or more in many cases have been from the European American populations. And whereas we're now becoming a majority minority sort of society. So one of those things in this field is one of the big challenges is to get more folks to participate and engage in this so that precision medicine will really work for all. The NIH has a big program called the All of Us program that used to be called the Precision Medicine Program. They renamed it the All of Us program because they really realized how much of this is a problem that all of us need to participate. So when I look at how the technology in our field is really developing, we need more participation and we need more inclusion. We need more minority founders in this space, more minority scientists, researchers, people doing the studies, so that our communities are equally represented and the products that result really work for all. We spend a lot of time in my company really making sure as we design our studies that we've got enough women and minorities included in those studies to make sure that the product we end up with is really relevant. But I don't know that that's been the case throughout the history of our industry. I know actually probably hasn't. So I'm hoping that we'll see some positive change in that direction because it's something that really needs to be addressed.
Thank you for that, Tshaka. Anyone else have any final thoughts or comments before we transition to the Q&A?
Yeah, nothing to add. I thought that was great.
Yeah, perfect. I'm glad. That's a great way to end it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Q&A now. So we have a good number of questions here. I'm happy to see that the audience is super engaged with what we're talking about. I am going to start off with this first question from Colette Dickinson. Since having a patent accepted can take a long time, do you have to have final acceptance from the patent office before publishing anything about it or disclosing anything at a meeting or conference?
Yeah, that's a quick one. The answer there is no. So once you filed the patent, that gives you a priority date. And once you have that date, you can disclose. Now, some people will choose to wait. Some people will choose to wait until it's actually public. And once it's public, they might present. That might be the most conservative approach. But once you file the patent, you get a priority date. And from then you are free to disclose without losing your patentability.
I'd also add, do you need to disclose? Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. I mean, to the extent that going to a conference actually helps advance a particular business objective, sure. But my approach is to not draw attention to myself if I don't have to. It's part of why my company was in stealth for the first 3 years. I just didn't see the need to be out there. And so if you file the patent, yes, you can do that, as Cullen said, but if you don't have to be at that conference sharing all the details of your technology, I wouldn't do it. If the conference is helping you raise money, if it's helping you hire, if it has a very clear objective, do it. But sometimes I feel like in this social media age, I feel like way too many entrepreneurs are spending way too much time on the internet, on social media, just being entrepreneurs. You got a company to build, just go do that versus trying to be doing PR every single time and so on and so forth. That's my perspective. I just feel like if where you're presenting this, you have a very clear return on investment from that external engagement that you can measure, then you should go do it. But don't put yourself out there if you don't have to. That's my own 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's to the earlier thought. Like, I think that's one of the ways academia and entrepreneurship where there is some tension, because the academic mission would say, well, you want to get it out, but like that, if it doesn't meet a business objective, the business mission would say, like, nah, why would you do that? And so that puts you in this challenging place when you're in academia. So let's say you're a postdoc in academia and you're thinking about starting a company on that idea, right? You have it gets tricky on when and how and if you publish.
Right.
Yeah, that definitely leads us into this next question. So the next question is from Jason Allen. He asked, all of you have deep technical backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit about what parts of being an entrepreneur are at odds with being a scientist, technical founder, or what lessons have you learned from that?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I always view myself as a scientist first, right? Because I got my PhD and I love it because I get to think about hard problems. I view entrepreneurship as a way, as just another way to address problems, right? I mean, my life work, what I want to do is be a problem solver. I want to make the world better using what's in my brain, right? You can do that in academia, being in the lab and, making discoveries that you then sell to companies, or you could do that as an entrepreneur, also being in a research setting, a lab, or like that, and then sort of advancing it in a commercial sense. And I really like that part because for me, I'm a big fan of translational research, where you take the research and actually get it out into a setting where it helps someone like in your lifetime. I love that kind of research. And having worked in pharma before, that's direct translational. Here in genetic diagnostics, direct translational, making a patient's life better, saving a life potentially, that's what keeps me going from the research side. But I've had to learn how to apply some of the things that I learned from scientific method to just problem solving in a company. I feel like, if you're a good student of scientific method, you can apply that problem solving technique to a lot of different situations. That's helped me a lot in the business sense, I think, just to try to help us, get through different hurdles just by breaking down a problem along a logical pathway.
Yeah, thank you, Tshaka. I love that you said you got the best of both worlds, or that the skills help you overlap in both ways. The next question is around a topic that I think is super important for founders and is often one of the overlooked challenges of being an entrepreneur. So when you think about the team that you build, those hiring decisions carry so much weight because they can either make or break the success of the company. So where have you all met your co-founders, or where have you found your early executives and mentors who have helped you scale?
Network is huge there. It's really, because you have to be able to trust people. A lot of like the cliche with hiring is, hire slow, fire fast. Like even when you hire slow, even when you take time to vet people, sometimes you still make mistakes just because it's just life. Like they change, you change, the company changes sometimes, and it just doesn't work out. Selfishly, I found being in the Cambridge area for what we're trying to do, being in, the Boston, Cambridge area has been tremendous because there's just such an amazing network. It's like this dynamo. There are great people here because there are great people here, right? So like people want to be here because there are great companies to work for, which benefits our company. So like tapping into those ecosystems that have, good networks, I think is really important for really rounding out your team. You don't have to know everything. I do think as a co-founder, you need to know what you don't know and vigorously seek out folks that can fill in your gaps.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, Cullen. I think that that's spot on about finding your weaknesses and then being able to bring people onto your team who can fill in those gaps for you, because that's how you're able to come to the table with all the skills needed to succeed. And investors definitely look for that when they're evaluating founder market fit. So we are coming up to the last 5 minutes of the session. I'm going to throw one last question out there, and this is around the friends and family round in particular. So the question says, I've heard a lot of Black founders talking about bootstrapping for a long time because they were never able to raise and get past the family and friends round, with the assumption that this is necessary before you have more formal investment. Is that true? Is the family and friends round a necessary step?
I don't think so. I mean, again, we kind of bootstrapped until we got seed funding, right? You kind of do that. Many companies do it just because, again, on our side, we as minority founders, we didn't have family members willing to write a $100,000 or $200,000 check, right? So you really need a critical mass of early funding to get going, though. And so that's where, really going to an angel kind of group there or something like that could be very helpful. We went through an accelerator, which was very helpful to help us introduce us to some angels that helped us raise the first couple $100,000 to get us going. But friends and family really wasn't an option for us. Again, that's to Cullen's point. If you're the one that's sort of the key financial provider for many relatives, right? To think that they're going to come in and give to you is tough. But I think there are ways around that, and you just have to be very creative in that. And if you've got a good value proposition and you have a solid model, it shouldn't be too hard to find money. That's what I say. Like at least some of the startup money. And if you are still encountering those problems, it could also be just that the model's not right. So I think that has been my experience. If you got a pretty solid model, you will find some bit of money. Now, whether or not it's enough to sustain the runway to actually get you through the level of execution, that's the challenge that everybody faces. But I think that initial seed capital, you just got to find it wherever you can.
HBCU VC has a lab fund that we launched last year dedicated specifically to filling this gap. It is for founders. 50% of the fund is dedicated to HBCU affiliated founders, that's staff, faculty, and alumni. And the other 50% is for Black and Brown founders from any university affiliation. And we write check sizes between 5 and 20K to fill this gap of the friends and family round. And we accept applications on a rolling basis. So whether or not the family and friends round is necessary, I think Tshaka gave an excellent answer to that. But if you're looking for that type of resource, I would definitely recommend you check that out because it's a huge opportunity. And we have, like I said, $1 million to deploy over the next 2 years. So at that check size, we're supporting a lot of founders and would love to be able to get that opportunity out there to anyone who feels like they need support filling that gap. So we have 2 minutes remaining now. I would like to thank the panel. Thank you all for your participation today, for the gems that you dropped and the insights that you shared. Can I get one word that you would say describes the next year or the future of entrepreneurship?
I don't know if I have something for the future. I want to piggyback on something Jen said implicitly when she was describing her journey, which is, and this answers one of the questions, was what is one piece of advice you might share? Like, don't be an entrepreneur just to be an entrepreneur. Personally, I'm not a big fan of folks like, I just want to be an entrepreneur and don't know what problem they're going to solve. Like do it for like what the impact you're going to have on the world, not just to be able to say like you're going to be an entrepreneur. It's too hard to do just because you just want to have the title of CEO. Do it for the world, do it for the problem, not just to have the title.
I like that. That's a solid closing statement. Anybody have a solid closing statement to give us before we wrap up?
I would say don't be scared, right? Like, you know, I think Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook had lean in. Yeah, I love that philosophy. Don't be scared, you know, give it a chance, because if you're a talented individual, you'll always be able to find a job. I think if you've got the skills that are in demand, you'll always be able to get a job and sustain. But whether or not you're going to be able to make a generational impact is fully dependent on the risk level you're willing to take. And so I would just say to all the minority founders, as tough as it is to be an entrepreneur, don't be scared. If you feel in your spirit led that way, to kind of follow your spirit and believe in yourself, that you can win.
Yeah, my closing would be trust your gut. Whatever you're doing as an entrepreneur, if your gut is telling you to hire somebody, trust it. If it's saying don't hire them, trust it. If your gut is saying do this, trust it. So over the years, I'm learning. You have a very strong internal compass, and just tune it, continue to fine tune it, and just trust your gut. It's a long journey. There are easier ways to make money. This is not the easiest way to do it. If it was just to make money, honestly, there's so many other things you could go do. Don't do this because being a founder is cool. Make sure that this problem is one that just feels so acute in your mind and you couldn't imagine any other problem worth solving. And if you feel that way, go do it.
Thank you, Jen. And I feel like one word would not have been enough. I appreciate you all sharing those additional thoughts and comments. So with that being said, I'm going to bring the panel to a close. Thank you again for your time today.